and a very warm welcome to the Crash MotoGP podcast, episode 31, and the last one of our regular season run. We'll be back for one more for a Christmas special before the new year. And of course, it is myself, Harry Benjamin, with Pete McLaren and Keith Huewen on the show today. The Circuit de Catalunya has been confirmed on the MotoGP calendar for another 5 years at least. There's team manager movement with rumours of Pramac Francesco Guidotti leaving Ducati, and KTM confirmed Mike Leitner's exit. Plus, MotoGP gets the Drive to Survive action, and we have a special guest on the show as well. But before we introduce him, I think it's fair that we should touch on the sad passing of the former Formula One team boss, Sir Frank Williams, whose squad, of course, became one of the most successful in Grand Prix racing's history. And he passed away recently at 79. And Keith, obviously, synonymous name, not just in Formula One, but throughout motorsport as well.
Yeah, I think that any two wheels or four, or any kind of motorsport, as you just said, that will have followed Frank Williams from day one. I mean, he's an innovator. At the end of the day, the kind of guy that pushed the boundaries in every which way to make it better. And I mean, would Formula One be the same without Frank Williams? I don't think it would have been, to be honest with you. He was in at the earliest time. I mean, given the accident he had, a hire car accident of all things, I think he was with Pete Windsor, one of the well-known Formula One journalists. They had this big off in a Sierra of all things, I think. And he obviously did the damage to himself. But I mean, he's long lived considering his injury and still at the helm right up until fairly recently in his terms. But I mean, for me, he'll always be remembered as innovation. And I think, isn't there a tie-up, Pete, here as well with with electric bikes? I know not one of my favourites, but still innovation really is. And Gary Eckerold, I'm sure, worked for Williams, and Johnny Eckerold's son, Johnny Eckerold, 1980 350cc world champion, if I remember, beating the great Tony Mang at places like the Nürburgring back in the day. And again, when we went to Moto E, I remember ringing Gary up for a bit of help and information regarding battery life and where we're going and innovations and the like. So it kind of fits in quite well with what we're going to be talking with Luca about a little bit later on. I mean, innovation is everything when you're at the cutting edge of sport. Formula One was, Frank Williams was, and MotoGP in some respects has a bit of catching up to do.
That's right, Keith. I mean, the Williams team, it initially started off as a family-run sort of race team, didn't it? One of the what must have at the time been a lot of teams like that. But they managed to bridge that gap and bring it into this modern era of Formula One, and then expand into all these different areas, as you say, into this. They have different departments that cover all of this electric vehicle technology. And as you say, they've got, Gary Eckerold and people that used to run the World Supersport team, I think, didn't he? And then went to work for Williams and all of this other stuff. And so they just had, an input in so many areas of science and engineering. And I think, like you say, it's innovation, it's technology that everyone that follows motorsport thinks about when they think of Williams, and that figurehead, that person that it'd be very hard to have now. Race teams are owned on it; they're almost corporations, aren't they? But Frank was one of those personalities that came across, and we see them in the MotoGP paddock as well, where you have someone that everything is centered around and really pulls the team together. So yeah, as you say, a long life lived, but obviously sad to see him passing.
Absolutely, and it's interesting. I don't think I've told you this, but my one connection to motorsport pre getting involved in it, my dad, who is a neurosurgeon, but when he was in his youngest days, he was tasked with looking after Sir Frank after he had his accident. And he telling me the other day, the amount of people that turned up to the hospital, Nelson Piquet and everybody from Formula One who just wanted to make sure that he was okay and visit him, and you could just see at that time and now even more so what a legacy he's left and what a life lived for Sir Frank Williams. But he has sadly passed away at the age of 79. So everybody on the podcast and everyone from crash.net sends their condolences to the Williams family for Sir Frank Williams. Now, carrying on with the rest of the show and talking more about motorsport, which we all love to do. Everybody involved does it. And we do have a special guest on the show today. We're really bringing them to you in the off season. We are delighted to be joined by Luca de Angelis, who is the Deputy Manager of EM Motorsport. Now, Luca, very warm welcome. Thank you for taking the time out to join us today. I suppose, first of all, we should ask, just tell us a bit about you and EM Motorsport itself and what exactly is you do? Because I suppose you're not always, front facing right by the camera. So a lot of people who might be regular fans watching it on the TV might not know exactly what you do, but you do have quite an integral role throughout motorsport.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm really honored to be part of your show. I am Luca de Angelis, Deputy Manager for EM Motorsport. Yes, you're right. I mean, EM Motorsport has been involved with Formula One and motorsport in general since 2005 now. We have been developing different safety products throughout these years. And one of them is most probably the most important is the marshalling system. Marshalling system is, as the word says, is a system which is composed by different components, and some of them are digital flag panels, as you see now in Formula One and MotoGP and other championship. Car positioning, very high precise car positioning system, telemetry information dedicated to safety information and not team telemetry, so not car performance. Everything is based on safety. For example, communication between race control and drivers regarding flags or messages that are not actually part of the performance of the cars or vehicles in general. EM Motorsport has evolved its products since 2005, and we have integrated the marshalling system in 2006 in Formula One for the first time. And together, we collaborated with Charlie Whiting and the FIA for a few years, trying to design the best solution for this championship. And we have implemented for the first time this car positioning system in Formula One. And after that, speaking with Charlie and knowing and understanding the capability of the system, came out the idea of why not showing to the drivers not only the flag on the dash, but also a flag panel or something that it's a lot more visible to the drivers than the just standard waving flags. And this is in 2009, we implemented for the first time in history, motorsport history, the digital flag panels in Formula One. Of course, it took some developments, some investments, and we have now reached a very important results that has been recognized by the FIA and the FIM. And the flag panels are now becoming part of the safety measurements in championship and circuits as well.
The only question I've got to ask straight away, Luca, is how come it took so long for MotoGP to adopt it? Because it's a brilliant system. I mean, if you go back, I hate to say this, but if you go back to my day, the flags were about this big and they were waved in a corner about 300 yards away, and you'd be lucky if you saw them. So from a rider point of view, from a rider perspective, it couldn't come too soon, this kind of system. I just wonder why it probably took so long to integrate it into the MotoGP system.
Well, I have to admit that in Formula One, it's quite a long time that we have this system. But in motorsport in general, it's just the last couple of years that is growing this technology. The demand of this solution is increasing. And I believe MotoGP, as well as other motorsport championship or facilities, have starting now to understand the advantages of this system, which is not only for the riders or for the drivers, but it's also for the safety of the marshals that are standing around the track. And as you said, they are waving a small flag, but they have to extend their arms on the track to make themselves a lot more visible. And depending on the condition, like rain, fog, night, we have different kind of motorsports and in different time of the day. And it's all a matter of safety for the marshals, and being behind the debris fences or even far away from the track, but still being able to communicate with race control and to the driver in a very fast manner. It's all about safety, basically.
Did you have to redesign the whole race control situation, or was it a plug and play situation? Did it fit in with the electronics, the control systems that they already have in race control? Was it fairly easy to integrate it into the system that was already there, or did you have to redesign the whole thing around your system?
Well, it's an interesting question. Basically, the system as it was born, it was really at its young stage. So at the moment we added the flag panels, it was kind of easy then to integrate it with what was already there. And now it's 10 years of developments. We never stopped developing. It's always adding new feature or improving technology and making it more reliable and quicker, of course. And so everything was integrated together since the beginning. And we provide this solution of integration already for all circuits and championship now.
We talk quite a lot about these new systems that everybody's a supporter, by the way, of you and what you're doing. I mean, everybody in the paddock that I know, the panels are so much better than flags generally, particularly where you can position them. And you're right, with the marshals out of sight. But with the accidents we've had, particularly this year, I mean, there's been many over years, but particularly this year have been accidents. And I know Pete has been banging the drum about rider information being a little bit more instantaneous and getting control of rider information. I followed that up with Pete's, which I have to say I was a little bit dismissive of originally, but Pete's very good argument and yourself on the show here is going to knock me out, I suspect, and I'm going to have to keep my mouth shut for the rest of this year. But I was thinking that maybe is there a situation where riders don't always have time to look down at a dashboard? You can have a dashboard indication, you can have a dashboard message. Sometimes you're so busy, and the amount of turbulence around you, and some tracks is nowhere where you can take your eyes off where you're headed for. So looking at your pit board and looking for flags and signals externally, it's got to be in your eye line or you don't actually see it. It's really, really tricky. And I wonder whether there was a system in the helmet, like a light system, like a heads-up display type thing that can be integrated into your system to perhaps improve still further the early warning system for a rider, perhaps.
So the first characteristic that Charlie Whiting asked us, or let's say the first goal, was you have to distract the driver, or in this case, the rider. That was the main goal. And because, as you know, like when you're driving a fast car or a bike, you're focused on the roads, on the apex, or you're not really paying attention of the marshal waving flags or things like that. So the main goal was to distract the riders or the drivers. And this goal was reached by using high brightness or flashing rates, different color saturation. So everything, all these elements came together to create this distraction. In motorsport, in terms of like cars integration, it's quite easier to integrate this system on the steering wheel or on the dash. Because in any case, the driver is somehow always keeping an eye on car speed or engine rev. So it's easier to implement some LEDs on the steering wheel as they do in Formula 1, Formula 2, or other Formula 3 or other championship, to flash these LEDs in conjunction with the flag panels. It's a little bit more tricky on MotoGP because the rider is not always looking at the dash. So, as you said, yes, integrating something in the helmet, it would be probably ideal. We need to take in consideration that there are lots of components in integrating parts in an helmet. First of all, because helmet is a safety device. So it has to go through homologation process, and anything that you add to the helmet must go through different tests. Just an example, if I want to add a single LED in the helmet, I may need to think about putting a battery to light up an LED. And keeping a battery next to the brain of a driver can cause possible battery explosion, fire, which is not something that you want in this case. So there are some technology that are coming out that can be taken into consideration, but there are many things that needs to be addressed and
developed.
Develop, but also really understand how to integrate this sort of solution into this particular solution. For example, in Formula One and IndyCar, we provide what we call the EPA, which is an earplug accelerometer. It's an accelerometer sensor that is inside the driver ear canal. And that gives us information about in case of an accident, the deceleration of the driver head. And this is quite important for post-crash analysis, to understand what kind of acceleration the driver brain has had to go through, and to, let's say, improve performance of the helmet, of the harness, of all the safety devices. Also, in this case, the driver, when he's inside the car, he still has the possibility to connect by wire to the actual car. On a bike, it's a little bit different. On a bike, usually the rider has no connection with the bike. So all these things that needs to be developed. I
didn't realize that you were into the decelerometer or whatever it might be in the earpiece. It has to be it's a pet hate of mine in MotoGP. I think that we as a sport are behind the game when it comes to concussion, head injury, and understanding the rate of retardation that the helmet and the head inside it goes through. So you already have this kind of technology that's always already available. Again, I wonder why we're not already using that. Is it because it can't be hardwired? Is that the problem? It needs to be hardwired, something like that in ear.
I believe that is not the hardwiring is not the actual issue itself, because also in motorsport, like in cars, like in Formula One, they use it's hardwired, but there is like a standard, I call it standard jack connector, but the audio plugs that if you pull the cable just come loose. So in case of the rider falling from the bike, that cable just will come loose. So I don't see that as a big problem. So this could be an actual solution that can be used. I believe there is also some regulation in the bikes, in the MotoGP or super bikes, where the driver, for example, doesn't have any radio communication with the team. So probably things may change in the future, allowing this technology to implement in the bikes as well. And of course, we will love to integrate our solution also for bikes, because we see that in car environments, there are many information that are coming through, because not only acceleration, but gyroscope, temperature sensor, all this information are interesting for various reasons. Temperature, for example, is not to understand if the driver has fever or not, but if you think about closed cockpit cars, where in a summer day, the temperature inside the cockpit can get very high. So to understand if the driver is actually getting some air cooling and or I don't know, sometimes drivers want to suffer a little bit more, but avoiding having holes for cooling down the system can create some aerodynamic issues. So they would prefer to have to close these holes. So all this information can be quite important for the driver safety as well.
Mm-hmm. It's really fascinating, actually, hearing all that. I think there will be a lot of people who are watching this, probably a little bit angry that MotoGP hasn't introduced these kind of things sooner, because we have a lot of discussion this year, Keith being one of them. But, it was the concussion debate as well. We've had that time and time again, and we know they have certain protocols in the SCAT method, but you still see riders somehow passing that, and then they clearly probably shouldn't have passed it or somehow have got through it. But then you think, if you've got this indicator in your ear like you have in Formula One and IndyCar, that should give a pretty clear-cut definition. So it's clear that you're obviously you've got the technology and you're capable of doing a lot of things. What would you like to see implemented going forward, in particular into MotoGP? I know you can't reveal a lot of things, but what would you personally like to see implemented, and what can you do from all aspects?